Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge. Welcome to Eldridge and Company. Inside this remarkable woman is a giant talent. Not only is Elizabeth Nunez an honored scholar and educator, she's an award-winning author, mostly of fiction. Her new novel is Anna in Between. She's my guest today, and I welcome you.
Thank you.
I also think of you as a cultural anthropologist
Wow.
of the Caribbean. Before we go on, Caribbean or Caribbean?
Well, this is a testament to how I've become Americanized. I say Caribbean. But of course, when I meet my Caribbean friends, they remind me that it's Caribbean, as in the Caribs who lived in the Caribbean.
Oh, yeah, right.
But I'm going to say Caribbean most of the time with you, Ronnie.
Thank you very much.
That's what I say.
You've written a lot of novels. How many?
Seven. This is my
the seventh
novel.
one. And it's a wonderful story, and it's a wonderful setting. Are all of them set in the Caribbean?
No, you're making me kind of work back on it.
Yeah.
I think most of them are, but they generally kind of stride both places. You know, the characters generally have something to do with America, and sometimes they go back to the Caribbean, or sometimes the whole event occurs here in.
And where are you from?
Trinidad.
Anna in Between is a wonderful title because it is just that. And I was interested in it because she was in between everything.
Yes,
right?
yes. Yeah.
The different country, everything. But she's also in between herself and her mother.
Yeah.
And I just had a discussion with my daughter, and I feel that I'm her mother, basically, Beatrice, and the thing, that I don't realize the pressures that I put on my kids. So it's interesting.
Yeah.
Tell me what you were aiming at in this book.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, the novel resonates with a lot of women who say what you just said. They say that they didn't realize the extent to which they had that kind of pressure, as you say, on the children. And then I have women in their 40s and 50s who are saying to me, but I think it starts with my story. Yeah. I think so much of a writer's story starts with their own story, emotionally. That's the emotional drive for this story. I love my mother. My mother, I know, loved me, but we just weren't making it. And I think that in her mind, although I used to think that my father had a broader vision, but it seems that in both their minds, a successful woman is the woman who married and who had children.
Married well.
Who married well. Well, sometimes it didn't really matter.
It didn't matter.
What mattered is that there was security and there was solidity, that the family was in place. For my parents, as I grew older, the notion was, who's going to take care of you when you get older? And of course, I ended up being divorced, so it was a big problem for them. And so no matter, and I'm sort of talking about my personal story here, no matter whatever accolades I got or whatever achievements I made, they were pleased, they were happy for me, they were proud. But there was always, something's a little off here, Elizabeth. And that's the kind of pressure I think a lot of women feel. It was I'm pretty grown up. But it still was for my generation.
Yeah. How many women also left the island and came here? That must have been, was that something that they approved of? Well,
this is part of the story.
We're also mixing it up because the story is becoming your story, or your story is this.
Yeah, but
in the book, Anna also leaves the island.
Leaves the island.
And interestingly enough, she goes into the publishing business.
Right, she goes into the publishing. A Caribbean novelist that I admire a lot, Michelle Cliff. I can't remember which novel she says this in, but she has that same kind of situation where she's grown up and she turns back to her parents and she said, "You threw me out." And this is what Anna is saying, when Anna has a conversation with her mother and she says, you never asked me to come back. And her mother says, well, look at what America offered you. America offered you a job, America offered you hope, America offered you all of this. But the person always feels, you know, that the parent should have said, come back, or should have made much more of an effort. So there's always that kind of conflict with the immigrants, you know, the mother, the parents who think that if you immigrate to America, you know, the land of milk and honey, you will get a lot of opportunities, and you do get it. But the immigrant thinks somebody back home should be asking me to come back, particularly my parents. So to sort of answer your question, I think it has to do with periods. At the time I personally left Trinidad, you know, I came to school here, came to college here, but when I decided I was going to immigrate, we had our independence, but we went a new form of colonialism that we call neo-colonialism. And I didn't see too many opportunities for women. I also felt absolutely the pressure of marrying that I had. I mean, I didn't have anybody in mind, but I knew that that was the expectation, and very soon that's what I would do. And I didn't know what I wanted, but I knew I didn't want my life to stop there. I also felt that my mother was frustrated, really. I mean, to me, she was a brilliant woman, but there was, you know, she had to stay in the family.
Yeah. It's
so
interesting. Did she realize that, do you think?
Did she realize what? That she was brilliant?
Yeah, or that she also, that she hadn't been able to really, you know, expand out into the wider world.
In my novel, Anna is the only child of her parents. Right. My parents had 11 children.
Oh, well.
So what?
She was busy.
Yeah, but she was busy as a manager. She was an incredible manager. She ran a house from, you know, absolutely efficiently. My mother had a lot of talent. She loved dressing up, so she was, you know, she had absolutely great fashion taste. She was a terrific cook. She was a great thostess. She was head of the horticultural club. She ran a great garden. So that's what she did. She threw all that energy, and each time you saw her doing these things, she was head of the bridge club. As I watched her doing this, and I could see that this was a CEO in a big way.
It's so interesting, because that's always been a basic premise with me, in politics especially. If you can manage a household, you can certainly manage a campaign, or you can manage a company. It's absolutely. And it needs to be really treasured more, although fewer and fewer women seem to be managing the kind of household the way they used to. I think, it changes.
It was very difficult, and she was a reader. My mother read a lot, but I do think she was frustrated.
What did you mean by when once the country had its freedom, it was still colonialized?
To me, and I'm not the only one who has that point of view. I think that you see this in most of the countries that have been colonized, that when they get independence, the people who now take over are what we call neo-colonial people.
Had been trained, they developed during
and they have the same attitudes, the same positions.
How long ago was that happened?
But for Trinidad, we were independent in 1962. But it took a long while, and for some people, they think that we still haven't gotten there, you know.
Right. It's interesting.
Yeah. So that, you know, those were the kinds of. But then there was another group of people. My younger sisters, for example, didn't immigrate. They remained in Trinidad, and they have terrific careers.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
So it's not only the age and the parental relationships in this book. It's the relationship between the mother and the father. It's John and Beatrice, right? And their respect for each other, a little stumbling along the way. Right.
I think that what happened, I think after you immigrate for so many years, and I guess I'm speaking about myself, but a lot of immigrants that I know, you begin to see the world through American eyes. And that's how you view the world. And you realize when you go back home that there are other lenses to which you can see the world. And so for Anna in this story, viewing her parents' marriage through American eyes, there's a lot that she found intolerable.
It's interesting.
In the marriage. You know, she would not put up with certain things in the marriage. and that there's a lot she also found intolerable in the relationship of the mother to the people who help her.
Definitely, the whole class system, right?
A housekeeper and her
gardener.
But this is because Anna is looking at the world through American eyes. I mean, America has a real strong emphasis on independence, a real strong emphasis on being able to break through class barriers, to be who you can be, whoever you can be, to rise from wherever it is to up there. And so she, looking at it through American eyes, she sees her father limiting her mother's ability. She sees her mother limiting her gardener and her helper's ability. But she learns on this trip that she takes back home. She learns to see the world through their eyes, and when she sees the world through their eyes, a different world opens up.
So she starts by calling it the Caribbean, and then she goes down the Caribbean,
Right.
and then she goes down there and it's the Caribbean.
Yeah.
It's interesting. And then also, I think it's a comment on medical care, is it? And on the progress of that kind of, I don't know if it was or not. Was that when she got sick?
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
Ronnie, we're kind of right into the midst of this right now. I have in my DNA that everyone is entitled to medical care. It's in my DNA. And even though I've lived here very long, and I know that that's not so, that there isn't such a thing as free medicine, I still have that perspective from when I grew up in Trinidad. So there is that, but there is also, which I think that the people who are having problems with this proposition right now, is that would it be the same quality of healthcare? How much would the government really invest in having the healthcare be on the standard it would be? Now, in my experience, I certainly recall a brother, a sister, relatives who have gone through in Trinidad the public healthcare, the public hospitals were well treated. But in this novel, you see where the mother is saying that the government has not provided the resources needed to make that health care on the level in which it should be. So she is looking to come to America for her surgery. Interestingly, to bring this more personal, certainly the story is inspired by my story, and my mother did have breast cancer. She did have her surgery here in the United States, but she went back home. She went back to Trinidad. My mother is a real strong patriot, you know. She's a Caribbean woman through and through. And she said to me that the care that she got there was tremendous. She didn't have to pay a penny for her chemo, for her radiation, for her aftercare, for being taken from her house to that facility, how beautiful it was, and it sort of surprised her. So the country is reaching that level.
You're a distinguished professor of the CUNY system, and you literature is your field, right? Do you also teach creative writing?
Well, Ronnie, I like to say that books are the center of everything I do. I read them, I write them, I write about them, and I teach them.
That's so great.
This is my whole sort of, so I teach literature. I teach a very exciting course called the Evolving Canon, stretching the canon from the European classics, from the Western European classics, to include more writers. And I also teach creative writing, yes.
So in this book, you were really very creative in its simplicity. Is that right? I was astonished because I just felt the atmosphere.
Yeah.
I was really there. I could feel it. And it was very simply told.
Yeah. I think, you know, I always believe that the ultimate goal is simplicity. When people bring something that is complex, they think, oh, wow, this is really heady, this must be really smart. But it isn't as smart as when you actually know what you're going to do and you reach that other level of a purity, you know? It's like the pure diamond. And that's what I was trying to do in this novel. certainly you can describe things and get all, you know, lush and moving around, but to hit it exactly so that when the reader sees that scene, they know exactly what you mean, that they can transfer that image right into their head and know what they mean. So there's that kind of exactness that I wanted to get in this novel, of the language and exactness of the image and the scene, and also the sound of it. So maybe that's what you were saying when you said you felt the mood. For me, very much writing, the medium is very important to me. So I have to hear the words. You know, I know what I'm going to say, but I can't do it until I know how I'm going to say it. The words have to have that musical connection to each other.
So do you read what you've written out loud?
I'm hearing it in my head.
You're hearing it in your head.
I have to hear it in my head.
Yeah.
Many times I don't start a scene until I hear the line in my head, and that's how I go.
You talked just a few minutes ago about expanding the concept or the participation in classic novels. I mean, to include more. You've also done that with writers, as far as. Well, you organized the Black Writers.
Yes, I no longer do that, but
yeah.
I began that years ago with John Oliver Killens through grants from the National Endowment for the Humanities, and began a discussion, a public discussion with writers and critics and readers, just as public discussion. And I have to say that we've had just every major Black writer involved, every major literary critic involved, from Alice Walker to Maya Angelou to Henry Louis Gates, Stanley Crouch, Ishmael Reed. The list is tremendous.
So there's a conference now that meets once a year?
Well, someone else at the college is doing it, and I think the next conference is going to be in March.
And then you were the executive producer of a whole series on CUNY cable station.
That was a phenomenal experience. I think it was, I can't exactly remember the year, when it suddenly struck us that we had all these major writers here, right here in the studio. And we spoke to Bob, and
he runs the station.
He runs the station. But you know, they said, "Wow, let's take advantage of this opportunity." And they came to the college, created a studio in it, and just took these interviews of the writers. And then it took many years after that, following them up, filling it in with some personal anecdotes, and came up with a terrific series called Black Writers in America. And I think I understand that it was shown on over 200 PBS stations, and this is a CUNY TV program.
It's wonderful.
Yes.
Now, what about writers of other color?
For me?
Yes.
I also did something with BCAT, which was focused. BCAT is a cable television, a cable TV program that I think comes out of Brooklyn, and I did something with immigrant writers there. And then with Penn American Center, I did something with writers of color. And that meant for me, with the immigrant writers, that was just all immigrant writers. With the writers of color, that meant Asian, African, Caribbean, just the whole gamut. Why, maybe you're asking, not European writers?
No. I was just thinking of you know, Latino, Asian, and other.
Including Latino.
Right.
I did all of them, yes.
Right. Now, but you go back to Trinidad quite a lot, don't you?
Yes, I tended to go back at least 3 times a year, certainly on the holidays. But unfortunately, Ronnie, both my parents died, one after the other, in the last couple of months.
But you have a lot of sisters and brothers there.
Yeah, but we are, there are 11 of us, as I said. 5 of us are here in the United States, and the others are in the different islands. I think there are just only 3 in Trinidad now. Yeah.
And do you is that culture a distinct culture?
Trinidad?
Yeah, the island culture, I guess. Is Trinidad different from the other islands?
I think Trinidad is very different from the other islands,
like
because if you were in an airplane flying over Trinidad, you would see that Trinidad is in the delta of the Orinoco River, and it looks as though we were cut off from South America. In fact, you can see Venezuela from Trinidad.
Now you sound like Sarah Palin.
But this one's true, not from my house. from my house, but you can't see. Let's put it this way, I've seen it.
All right.
And my father got into a lot of trouble when he crossed that little water, because it's only 7 miles away.
Oh,
you know, when he made that, you know, when he gets into, because we share in the oil belt of Venezuela.
Did your father work in the oil?
Yeah, my father did. He started off with the government as a commissioner of labor, and then
As did the father in this book.
and then went into the oil as the
Yes.
father, and he ended up with a really distinguished career. He ended up being the first local person to be the director of the Shell Oil Company.
Oh, boy.
And he did the whole Antilles, director of the whole Antilles. But then he then became a sort of a consultant for labor until he was about 85. He did this, yeah.
So let's go back. What's the difference between the islands?
So yeah, so because we were cut off, we seem to be cut off from South America, we have the same fauna and flora.
Oh, this is
So the
interesting.
National Geographic, many times, instead of going into the Amazon, would come to Trinidad. We have we have deer. I hate to say this, that my father used to hunt them. We have that wild cat, which is kind of like a small tiger, I suppose, something like that. In terms of the fish we have, the crustaceans we have, the flora, Trinidad is extremely blessed. We have a natural fish, asphalt lake, pitch lake, the La Brea Pitch Lake, that Sir Walter Raleigh corked his boats going into El Dorado, trying on his way to El Dorado, and then we have incredible amount of oil and gas.
So the economy there is pretty stable.
Oh,
huh?
absolutely.
Very good.
Trinidad looks like a little New York sometimes when you go.
Was it affected in the recent world crisis?
I think it was, but I don't know to what
Not as bad,
extent
yeah.
it was. I don't well, if I am to listen to the news, they claim, but that's a claim, you know, everybody looks at the optimistic side of it. But a couple of years ago, the Wall Street Journal did an article on Trinidad and said that we had discovered gas pockets to provide gas for some 100 years.
Oh, that's very remarkable.
And I think we provide the United States with 75% of its liquid gas.
So if you're asked, you're an American.
Very much so now, yeah. I have to say. I mean, you talk about this, am I a transnational? Do I have a foot in either place? And I think for a very long time, I would say that's what I was. But I find my
Without the parents and the whole roots?
And also my son.
Yeah.
You know, I have a son who's very much an American. And there's some things that clearly I see it as a Caribbean person, but I feel at home.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Do you find teaching writing? I mean, you do teach creative writing in the whole thing.
Yeah.
Are we nurturing a group of good writers?
Clones? Clones?
No, not clones. I mean, original writers.
I think so.
You know, people are talking about the effect of the internet and all this Twitter and all this fast communication, that young people are really not learning the art of writing and the love of language. Do you find that?
Well, so much of writing has to do with your imagination, and I guess, and your appreciation for words, for language. You know, I was just on a panel the other day, and there was a young man there who said something about the influence of the internet on the kind of work being produced.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, maybe that's what happened with this novel. That's what happened with Anna in Between. He says that because of the internet and because of what's going on in the movies and on TV, that we have to hit the scene faster.
Oh, that's so interesting.
We have to hit the scene. We have to be more precise in the language we use. And I thought, boy, he was into something. I didn't think about that when I was writing Anna in Between, but maybe that's what happened to me, because you can look at contemporary novels and find a huge distinction between the way the novel is plotted, the language used, the sentence structure from, say, novels in the earlier part of the 20th century.
It doesn't have the embellishment and the flourish.
Take a writer that I admire very much, J.M. Coetzee, the South African writer who wrote Disgrace and won a Nobel Prize. He has that precision, very much that precision.
It's very interesting.
And very much hitting the scenes without much embellishment. And so maybe, so when you ask the influence of the internet and so on, maybe it's influencing a different kind of writing, a different kind of novel.
When I introduced you, I said you were an award-winning author.
Yes.
You've got so many awards that I can't even begin to mention them. But you've won the National Book Award.
No, it was the American book.
The American book. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Maybe this will win them. What the novel I'm working on.
Yeah. And but you have really gotten very much praise for your writing.
Yes. I think this was nicely reviewed in the Times a couple of weeks ago, and I believe it, and I know it's an editor's choice. And then I had starred reviews in things like and Library Journal and Publishers Weekly. So I feel good about that.
Yes.
I feel that there is a following. There are people who
really
claim to be fans of my work, and I'm pleased with that.
Well, I'm a fan of you, and just period. So
thank you so much, Ronnie.
I hope people will enjoy this book as much as I did, and thank you so much for coming.
Oh, you're most welcome.
Thank you. If there are any people you'd like to hear and topics you'd like us to explore, please let me know. You can write to me at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016, or you can go to the website at cuny.tv and click on Contact Us. I look forward to hearing from you.